Apologize again that we are not able to watch the full video with you today, but we appreciate both of our panelists, lightning talk panelists, Liz Romero from the OC Public Libraries and my colleague Pam Evans from the Redwood City Public Libraries. Please do check out their stories about how their libraries have been adapting to the new normal. So now please welcome our three panelists for our next talk, Advocacy in COVID Times with the Ease of Libraries. Our panelists are Alan Fishel, Skip Dye, and Paula Miller. And the Ease of Libraries describes how expert library professionals help to facilitate education, employment, entrepreneurship, empowerment, and engagement for everyone, everywhere. Alan Fishel is a partner at the law firm Arndt Fox and leads that firm's communications and technology group. He has represented ALA on many matters and currently serves on the board of United for Libraries. He is also the chair of the Ease of Libraries Task Force. Alan provides frequent training on a variety of topics, including how to improve advocacy and negotiation skills. Welcome, Alan. Our next presenter is Skip Dye. Skip is Senior Vice President of Library Sales and Digital Strategy at Penguin Random House. He has been an active member of the United for Libraries Board since 2015 and served as president from 2018 to 2019. He is also co-founder of the Penguin Random House Literacy Award for Teachers and the Penguin Random House Innovation Awards for Libraries. And last but not least, Paula Miller is the director of the Baltimore County Free Library in Maryland. She has served as the director or administrator of libraries in 4 states, Maryland, Colorado, Ohio, and Delaware, and her work has always focused on identifying new and emerging needs, roles, connections that keep libraries relevant, effective, and sustainable. Paula believes our public libraries are critical community resources that bring together people and are bridges to opportunities in individuals' lives. So welcome again to Alan, Skip, and Paula.
Okay, let's see, one second.
And
do you have them all set as co-hosts?
They are on their way to being co-hosts.
All right, and then I am actually going to share their presentation.
And Elaine, this is Beth. Can they, can one of them run the slides from your share?
Yeah, as long as we give remote control.
Okay.
I think you have.
So Alan, Skip, or Paula, if are any of you interested in running the slides, I'm going to be monitoring chat and Q&A. Or if you need, Elaine can run the slides. Someone from the partnership team can.
Whatever anybody wants to do, I'm open. I'm loose and ready to play.
All right, I know Alan's here and Paula, you also be. Okay, good. All right. Well, Elaine, are you able to run them?
Yeah, so as long as you let me know when you want me to move ahead, I definitely can. And we really appreciate you all being here today.
Thank
all
you
right, great. So I will, for all the attendees, my name is Beth Novolinsky. I'm the Executive Director of United for Libraries. I am not on camera with the speakers, but I will be monitoring the chat and posting links. And I will be coming back on with them after their presentation to facilitate Q&A. So if you have questions for the speakers, please put them in the Q&A panel so that we don't miss those. And we'll be sure when we get to those questions to ask them or read them out loud. And to give out a shout out to Tess, by the way, really quickly. Tess Wilson, fabulous volunteer with United for Libraries, our new rep and liaison to the Freedom to Read Foundation, and also a co-author of a new book that we have out on engaging younger board members for library friends groups, trustees, and foundations. Released at the same time as a book you'll hear about from these presenters. All right, so over to the United for Libraries Ease of Libraries group.
Beth, thanks. This is This is Alan, and it's just such a pleasure and an honor to be here today with all of you and with Skip and Paula to talk about what we think is a really important topic, the ease of libraries. Next slide. Whoops, one slide back. Yeah. So the ease of libraries, and these are just our default ease, which are education, employment, entrepreneurship, empowerment, and engagement. When I got involved working with the libraries many years ago, the first thing that struck me is that libraries did so many great things, but it was really hard to organize and compartmentalize what they were. The more people you asked, the more things you knew that they did, but it was kind of confusing because the wording was so different all the time and people were saying things in so many different ways. So we went back and thought about it and said, what is it that libraries do? And you can quibble with the ease and you can change them, but what we thought is you could really determine a lot of what libraries do with these 5 E's. You could put things into education, employment, entrepreneurship, empowerment, and engagement. Sort of like when you have your drawers, you've got your drawers with your shirts, your drawers with other things. You're separating things to make it easier to sort of recollect and understand what libraries are doing, both internally and externally. So we came up with the phrase, the ease of libraries, to cover these 5 E's as a potential thing that libraries could be talking about. Next slide. So one of the reasons we got involved in coming up with something like the ease of libraries was because of what we call the reality perception gap. And the question, of course, is right away, what is the reality perception gap when it comes to libraries? And what it is if you think about any entity, any organization, any industry, you think about it could fall into 3 categories. It could either be essential, it could be nice to have, or it could be obsolete. And there's no question that libraries are essential. And they're not only essential in one way, they're essential in many ways. In fact, with respect to all of the E's we just spoke about. Yet, while some people realize how essential libraries are, others think of them as either nice to have or obsolete. So that's the reality perception gap. Libraries are clearly essential, but not everybody views it that way. And many are misled into thinking that libraries are something less than essential. Next slide. Okay, so a reality perception gap exists, and we understand that, and it's a shame, and it shouldn't be that way. But why does it matter? So a lot of times when we tell people the reality perception gap exists, their first question is, okay, you're right, it absolutely does. But why does that matter that a reality perception gap exists? And the reason it matters is because when you are speaking with people, trying to convince them to give you funding, trying to convince them to partner with you, it is really important, if possible, that they consider you essential. And given that libraries are essential and essential in so many ways, it makes such a difference when you're meeting with people that they recognize that. Because if they think you're just nice to have, or even worse, obsolete, they're going to take a different view. I do a lot of work with the Federal Communications Commission, and I've done a lot of work with ALA, with the Federal Communications Commission. But in a matter that didn't relate to the ALA, but related to a small client I had, I went into the FCC and I made what I thought was a really good argument. And there was about 9 people in the room from the FCC, and one of them looked at me and just said, "That is a great argument. That is fantastic analysis, and you will lose." And that's exactly what he said in that way. And I was like, okay, so, please elaborate. You seem to like the argument. Why are we going to lose? Because your client's too small, because you're not important enough. We ended up winning by forming a coalition, but that's neither here nor there for the purpose of this. There's just no question when you go into a room, when you're meeting with people, how they're perceiving you, whether you and who you're representing, whether it's essential, nice to have, or obsolete, is critical to the success of your advocacy. Next slide. So now we have to get into what really are the reasons why we have a reality perception gap. And the real reasons we have it are 2. One is the past perception hurdle, and one is the lack of one dominant activity hurdle. So what I mean by the past perception hurdle is a lot of people, you meet people, in fact, I introduced Skip and others, a lot of people to people who I know who, have not been, big library proponents. And the first thing they always say is, oh my gosh, when I was 9 years old, I had a library card and I took out books and it felt really good. So a lot of people have this perception of libraries that's based on the past, sometimes based on 20 years ago, frankly, sometimes based on 40 or 50 years ago, that libraries are just a place to borrow books and therefore not critical, not essential, given you can get so many things online now. Other people are a little bit further along and they have the perception that libraries are fabulous for getting information, but you can pretty much Google anything now in their minds. And so therefore, they're not viewing libraries as essential. And that's just sort of one of the two hurdles libraries have is the past perception hurdle. If you create a new startup, you have to convince people that what you're doing is excellent and important. But with your libraries, you actually even have a further hurdle. People love libraries, but they don't always think of them as essential because of those past perceptions. But the second hurdle that libraries have to overcome is what I call the lack of one dominant activity hurdle. Libraries do so many great things. As we talked about earlier with just the 5 E's, they do great things in each of those categories. But so often when you're dealing with groups that are clearly viewed as essentials, like schools or hospitals, they have one dominant activity. Schools are absolutely essential. They educate. Hospitals are absolutely essential. They heal, hopefully most of the time, and bring back health. So they're very easy to do, very easy to explain how they can be essential. With libraries, it's more complex, both because of the past perception hurdle and the lack of one dominant activity hurdle. Next slide. Whoops. So where I want to go with this, and I'm going to turn it over to Skip in a minute, is how do we get past these two kind of hurdles? And the real thing to think about with this is if you just have messaging that is kind of feel-good messaging, libraries are great, libraries are special, libraries are terrific, that can be terrific internal messaging, but it won't overcome either of the hurdles, let alone both of the hurdles. What you're going to need is messaging like the ease of libraries. If people can look at it and say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that they did all of these E's. Wow. So my perception in the past of what libraries were, I've got to change that view now that I recognize all they are. And on the other hand, with respect to these 5 E's, they take what can be a negative in terms of marketing, a positive in terms of overall, but a negative in terms of marketing, which is, hey, you don't have one dominant activity, and really turn it into a positive because all of a sudden you're seeing these 5 things. And I think the best analogy that I've come up with for it is these two hurdles are really no different than 2 deadbolts in a door for which one key opens it. So you have 2 options. You could bang on the door and hope to open it and just hope you can overcome the 2 hurdles by banging on the door. Probably won't work. And that's what we've been doing in the past with messaging that's libraries are great or libraries are terrific. Or you could take alternative 2. You could use the key, use messaging that addresses both of the hurdles, both the lack of one dominant activity hurdle and the past perception hurdle, which is what the ease of libraries do. And that completely changes the dynamic and changes how you can succeed in advocacy. I'd like to now turn it over to Skip for the next portion of this.
Alan, thank you. And thanks everybody for joining me. Right now, my neighbor is practicing another E, and that's being energetic because he's decided to start mowing his grass. So occasionally, if you hear some lawnmower go by, know that someone's being energetic right now. So as Alan was saying, my involvement with United for Libraries and my involvement with advocacy started off with me trying to understand how to present ideas that resonated, presenting ideas that would communicate, that would actually share a common thread of communication between whoever I'm advocating or talking to about the importance of libraries for their community. So I thought I'd go over some of the E's of library and talk a little bit deeper and go into some of these ideas about stuff. And we can go back to that previous slide, Ellen. I'm just going to stay on that slide for the time being. But for education, and just so that you guys can see how to apply it and see where I'm talking about and how you can use it. So for education, particularly now in COVID, times, this is a really great and key point that really resonates to those people in your communities that are influencers, people who are influencers related to your budget or influencers related to doing donations to the library and supporting the activities with in-kind and actually monetary donations. So talking about education, we're talking about, of course, like reading to children, to the story time, through which has now gone virtual for most of the libraries out there and schools. Also helping kids learn how to socialize with others. Those are important attributes of education that can be brought into the conversation as you start thinking about and documenting what are some key components. All of these 5 points are just basically, I call them stepping stones that you can then add to and bring your own. You don't have to be an E. It can be any letter of the alphabet if you want to. We just used it as a way, as a vehicle to be easily remembered and connecting. So that when I'm talking to a particular senator, for instance, and talking about what's important to them, I know education is a key component, then I can talk about how libraries play a key role in their community. That also dovetails greatly not only to early childhood and K through 12 education, but also talking about adult education. And that's one thing that I want to remind people that that is a very cellular talking point that really resonates with a lot of local leaders to understand about the importance of, of course, adult literacy and adult reading, high school equivalency exams and diplomas, but also supporting colleges and community colleges in their education is a key piece of it as well. And as with COVID that we've been going through right now, many people have been using little micro education courses to take and to hone skills since they are home, if they're on furlough or unemployed because of COVID. This allows them to look for other jobs, which kind of goes into my next E, which is employment, which is a key and strong resonator for any leader at the state level or county level. And it is talking basically very clearly how to get people employed. And it's basically from self-evaluation to skill building to finding and helping land that job. I don't think that a lot of, especially senators, state senators, really understand the role that the library plays with employment in their community, from job applications to learning new skill sets. These two things alone, education and employment, are strong resonators that can then create a good conversation. Going on to entrepreneurship is one of the areas that a lot of people also think about in terms of what they want to see in their community, but not necessarily as it connects to a library. I know that there's so many libraries that have actually fostered and where new businesses have actually occurred, and other programs that I've heard and actually witnessed in Ohio and in Delaware, where I am now, where they actually work with people to help create new businesses. And this is everything from basically allowing, of course, for exploration of interests and research on those interests, facilitating actually connections. These can help develop social networks between other entrepreneurs in the community, and also identify resources for funding, particularly in growing the business. I think that right now during COVID times, the entrepreneurship piece is very key, because right now people are at home, are thinking differently about their roles in their jobs. As we go back to the empowerment piece, just to touch on that a bit, we're talking about here is about empowerment related to financial issues, technology, and health literacy. These literacy issues related to particularly financial are right now, and health right now are very much in demand. And one of the key roles of libraries to do is to talk about that empowerment. The last, and I'll go into it, is key, and that is the whole idea of engagement. And this engagement is a broad one, and is one that is very exciting to talk about. And it's engagement that can talk to people about learning new skills. As we talked about learning, I would say stuff around cooking or sewing or dancing or exercise. And even a lot of libraries have done some really wonderful web-based programs now and have great resources that need to be highlighted in your community in a different way, and not only to the patrons who use them, but also to those people who are influencers and people who you want to affect and engage to where they become more involved with the library. The whole key part about the engagement and the role of the libraries as it's evolving is it being the town hall. And even in this time of COVID, I think that the greatest attribute that libraries have is their unique role in the community to make a connection where otherwise people may not have thought to make connections before. And it's nice center point to highlight as you do your advocacy. So we can go on to the next slide now. So I want to talk about the common why I like this idea. When I first met with Alan and talked to Alan a long time ago and talked to others, this was actually at a fly-in advocacy event sponsored with ALA in DC. We were coming in to talk to senators and representatives of various states. And I realized that there was no common language, sort of where we were all singing from the same hymnal, as I said, as I show my Baptist roots. But also it was allowed us to basically have a common understanding and else all of us be able to work together. The other thing is I needed it to be very easy and direct. And the nice thing about utilizing the ease for me was a very easy and direct way to talk about a topic. And the ease actually helped me facilitate many of my, as I call them, the 5-minute elevator speeches by having in my back pocket and knowing who I was meeting with some of the key points. Because I think it's important is as you speak to legislators, if you speak to county commissioners and county executives, or even to your boards about funding, I think the key point is to understand what's important to them first. And those are the points that you should bring up and resonate. And whether if it's education, employment in the county or in the state, or if it's literacy scores in the city or the county or the state, those are key things that your library advocate can bring and speak about very clearly by utilizing the ease to organize their language. But I've talked about some now of the sort of the internal messages and how to make them relevant a bit to your piece, and I hope that helps. And of course, if you have any questions, etc., continue to ask them. But I'm now going to pass the baton to the gracious Paula Miller and allow her to talk about some of the external applications and some practical uses.
Thank you. Yeah, next slide. All right, and are you hearing me all right?
You're a little.
Paula, no. Yeah, we can't really hear you very well.
All right, then I'm going to. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to not use the headphones.
All right, Paula's getting her audio reset so she's more clear. We'll give her just a moment here. You're currently muted, Paula. Here.
Okay.
There you go.
And please remember, the handouts are available on the website, either on the PLP website or linked in the chat. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A.
All right, Paula, you want to check your audio?
Yeah, I am trying.
Okay, you sound more clear there, so I think you're good. Yep, you're good.
All right, great. All right, so no headphones. Thanks. It is really a pleasure to join everyone today for this session on the ease of libraries. When I first heard about the ease of libraries was before I think it became a thing and a phenomenon that Alan and Skip helped it to become. So it was just sort of mentioned somewhere that United for Libraries was beginning to work on these. And I thought, you have solved my problem. we do talk about our libraries so many times to so many different groups of people, and I was looking for a way that would allow us to talk about the services that we provide, but talk about it in a memorable way and in an easy way to remember. Whether you're a staff member, a board member, a legislator, when you hear something about us, we want it to be memorable. And so I loved that, one of the external advantages is that it's very understandable. It's very supportable because it allows one to drop the many things that we do in our libraries into these big, broad buckets. And we've been talking about 5 different E's for our library, for instance. We chose 4, and I'll talk to you about those in a little bit, and about the flexibility of those E's. But whatever you use, it's easy to remember. It's easy to remember. They all start with E. They're all important things to you or your library. And they're essential services that we're really talking about. Essential services, essential values that your library holds, that all fit into these buckets. And that makes them memorable. They're single, strong, powerful words. Next slide. I just talked a little bit about this, and I think I'm supposed to do this next slide. So there is no need to use all of the E's as the 5 that were presented. Again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But those that are most relevant to you or to that occasion or to that audience or to that encounter or meeting are the ones that you can bring up and talk about. You want to have several at the ready, but you can choose any of those categories when you're ready to talk about them. Next slide. Again, this is really all about the flexibility of these. It's why I loved them to begin with. There are no hard and fast rules, except that they begin with an E. Skip just said you can change that letter if you want, but mostly it's that it's a single word. It starts with E. And again, 5 have been provided, but you can change those up. Choose what is best for you and your library. And that's what makes it easy, not hard. You know, we're not trying to add another layer of complicatedness to the presentations that you need to do, to the marketing that you need to do, to flyers that you need to prepare, anything like that. We want to make it easy for you. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit now about the practical side of this. Let's talk about where the ease of libraries has been used and where they've worked. Next slide and next slide. All right, first of all, you have an example in front of you from Brownwood, Texas, where they decided to do an entire campaign using the E's of libraries. And their E's were education, employment, entrepreneurship, engagement, and empowerment. And they pulled all of those together by saying libraries are essential. Again, it makes it easy that you align everything, and it makes it easy to talk about. So under education, they talked about the resources that they have for kids. Under employment, they talked about some of the testing resources they have. They had just begun a big effort around entrepreneurship with the Small Business Reference Center, and so promoted that here. Talked about engagement and libraries coming into the, individuals coming into the libraries for that, and how that empowers both individuals and the community. Next slide. All right, this is an example from Baltimore County, where and this is actually an excerpt from a budget presentation that we were doing. We chose 4 E's. So here's an example of some flexibility. And our E's were education, the economy, equity, and engagement. We chose education and the economy for obvious reasons. Those were very strong community needs with high impact areas. Equity and engagement, we chose purposefully to have a couple of things on the values side of our library. Again, all single, strong, memorable words. We used this to talk about what we do in each of those big buckets. You know, there's so many things that we do and they're all in these little cups and you can mix and match them and put them in the right bucket when you're ready to talk about them. This is our budget report, but we also use this in a transition report for a new county executive coming in. We used it in our annual report. We used it at a legislators breakfast to talk to legislators about what the library is all about and doing. We used it in a Chamber of Commerce presentation where it really was popular because under the economy, we combined employment and entrepreneurship. And it was a presentation on the kickoff of our Entrepreneur Academy. So it really helped us to kind of roll all of that together. We've also used our 4 E's in grant applications, which makes it easier for grantors to understand the many things that we do and why they're important. Next slide. All right, then in Maryland, and this was in 2018 or 2019, Skip, you may remember.
It was 2018-19 is went into both of them when this funding campaign began, because we were involved with it on the United side to help.
Yes. To have greater impact. So there are 24 counties in Maryland. We have a Maryland Library Legislative Day every year. And the library advocacy interest group that year decided to use the E's of libraries to talk to our legislators about what we do. So 24 counties, all of those legislators, we came into Annapolis equipped with this brochure that was handed out to every legislator, no matter what county you were from. And then each county also had provided photographs of some of the activities from their county. Each county arrived, all of the county representatives arrived with stories in hand that fit into each of those categories. This is a nice slide because it also shows the impact of numbers. And I think the impact of using the E's statewide was really beneficial, and these numbers were very impactful there for that as well. Okay, next slide. Here's a little bit more from that brochure, just showing what we did. There was also a reception in the evening for legislators, and we used the captions and some of the photographs in a slide presentation that ran throughout the reception that evening. Okay, next slide.
I just want to jump in on Paula's messaging about what was nice about the Maryland campaign, and it's been used by other libraries since, and it's been great and wonderful and exciting to hear of different stories. But this is great, an example of what we said earlier, right? Of when you all met in Annapolis, everybody had the same story to tell. Everybody had the same choir book to sing from. And they were able to use these E's to resonate. So then after those advocates left Annapolis and the legislative body, the members were talking and communicating with each other, it resonated because they were all hearing the same story, either together or many times separately, all these unique stories, but the thread was consistent. So I think it really shows, I think, an importance of even important now with challenges in budgets that are being hit by COVID-19 and the revenues related to taxes, et cetera, for communities and the necessary funding needed. It's just basically how can we use the ease of the libraries right now to help and affect the story. I think that's a key component. And thanks, Paula, for going through those examples. To take off and talk a little bit more about it and stuff, and Alan, you're welcome to jump in, and Paula, to talk about some of Paula, some of the practical stories, et cetera, is just that right now as you're thinking about any fundraising appeals, it's a great way to organize your thoughts, whether it is to going to grantors, as Paul said, or just talking internally. But as I was raised, as I said, to talk about my Baptist roots, I was raised not to be a Christmas and Easter Baptist. I was raised, so I'm taking the same philosophy about being an advocate. The whole idea about advocacy right now, what I think is important, is that we need to be always talking about and sharing with others and telling the stories of our libraries. And I think that's very important. And as you partner with your friends groups and trustees and the foundations, also get them to join in and understand how you can help spotlight the importance of what you do, what your staff does right now to show the value and how the libraries are essential, staffing is essential, and what they supply together is a unique support system to the community right now, especially during this time of COVID. I know that we had if we want to go into and ask and see if there's any questions now from people to have about the program, et cetera, we can talk about that.
Sure.
And I also know we can also talk about some other things related to what St. Paul has been working on.
Sure. There are no questions currently in the Q&A panel, but I encourage everybody to put your questions in there. Also, in the chat, feel free to share what your E is. Let us know. Maybe it's not one of those 5 E's. Maybe it's something different. Think of another E or another letter, as was mentioned here as well. Again, I'm Beth Navalinsky. I'm the Executive Director of United for Libraries. So honored and thrilled to be working with these speakers who are presenting to you today. And I'll let you know too that Alan is a co-author with Jillian Wentworth, from a United for Library staff member, of a new book called Proving Your Library's Value: Persuasive, Organized, and Memorable Messaging. And it is, thank you, Paula, that's great. It is an interactive workbook. It has worksheets and tips and exercises that you can do to delve into your community, what's valuable, so you can identify those E's in your community and break that down. And we have a 3x3 network, a 3x3 framework. And Alan, maybe you can mention that real quickly of how that 3x3 works. And then I do have a question. So you can mention that and then we'll pull to the question.
Sure. The 3x3 framework was, okay, you've got these 5 E's or whatever E's you want to use. How do we look at the categories underneath them? So our task force came up with 3 categories as Skip alluded to, underneath each of the 5 E's. So for just by way of example, in education, it was pre-K, K to 12, and adult education, doing it by age. And some of the others, it was doing it like with employment, it was doing it more by where you were in the process. And with engagement and empowerment, it was different types of activities you could be doing. And then under those categories, and this is what Beth meant by 3x3, we had 3 categories for each E. So as I said, again, with respect to education, it'd be, pre-K, K to 12, and then adult education. And under each of those categories, we had 3 subcategories. And that way, if you're going to a meeting and you're thinking what they really want to talk about is K to 12, you kind of have your subcategories under K-12, you're ready to go. But as Skip pointed out, adult education is really important. So they may also want to talk about adult education. So you'd want to have that down as well, maybe in your back pocket, just ready to go with it. The idea was, and as Paula talked about, we want to be really flexible here, but we also wanted to start with a default so that if people are looking at a blank sheet of paper, it's not as easy. You can take these categories, subcategories, and E's and change them any way you want. But the overriding thing is, if you think about all of the noise that is out there today, all of the noise, politics, non-politics, everything, how do you cut through that? The way to cut through it is in library world is through something like the E's that keeps it organized, consistent, and as Paul and Skip mentioned, and it's so important to us, easy to remember both when you give the presentation and then for others when you leave. Beth, let me turn it back to you.
Great, thank you. All right, so we have two questions here. Skip, I'm going to shoot the first one to you, and then and Paula might want to also comment. But the question is, how might you use the E's to gain participation of groups and communities that traditionally do not use the library? And I'm giving this one to you first, Skip, because you're coming in from a corporate background and engaging with libraries in many different ways through your job, but also being involved in the state friends group there in Delaware and getting involved in your local library. So you can give us some examples and talk a little bit about that. Thank you.
It is key. One of the things that I talked to, and I'm going to reference a little bit of what the Friends of St. Paul has been doing. As you can all imagine, right now, St. Paul has been going through a lot of change and a lot of introspective looking at their community. And it kind of, I'm getting long-winded on an answer, so if I become too Southern Baptist, just calm me down. But going back to gaining participation in the groups and going out, is the whole idea is that how to relay the story that for your library to these groups about that when anyone walks in the door of a library, they are equal. They have equal opportunity, they have equal access, and it's a great equalizer for anyone in the community. So I want to talk about how we've been using our library, for Penguin Random House, how we partner with the libraries in our community, is that we saw a direct need. And this came from Carroll County director, love wonderful stuff, and the county in which we were located in Westminster, Maryland, as an example, why I get advocacy efforts there in Maryland, is that we had a need of basically getting high school equivalency tests, getting some of our employees to be able to have access and go to take the classes. They were having trouble getting access to, or didn't feel comfortable going to a high school setting for it. So actually we started utilizing and partnering with Carroll County in a unique way to offer and help them offer support classes to those employees, many of whom have never walked in the door of a library, never thought they would walk in the door of the library. Now going there to actually get tutoring help for their GED, that sort of brought them and introduced them to the whole new idea of the library. So that's just one group, and that came from other businesses, because when we started doing it, other businesses saw what we were doing and how we were using the library space and using the resources of the library to actually move our business forward in a unique way, then caused other business leaders to also look at that. So I want to say, don't forget to go out and talk to your Chamber of Commerce, partner with them in unique ways to introduce the library and the services that they can perform. Everything from meeting spaces. I know at the time of COVID, that's not possible as much anymore, but you do have a lot of digital resources that they can use and can partner. So that's one thing I want to highlight and talk about. In talking about what St. Paul went through, I mean, they took the E's and they needed to think about how to reintroduce the library as a healing space, how to introduce the library as an education space for their community, and how to try to cross the barriers and have basically conversations around equality in a unique way. And they really did a great job in using the E's to reach out to their community, to get more engaged with these topics, and became sort of a great pivot point for many organizations in the city as their role. They also looked at, in terms of employment, going back to that, they were going and looking to businesses and saying, how can we help you rebuild your business after it's been hit so hard by COVID? Is it through loan programs? Is it through grant programs? Also, is to try to think about creating unique coalitions within the city and to help these businesses to survive. I could go on for a long time with what St. Paul's been working on, but I think a lot of this stuff is a key component to, particularly to Mike's next question about virtual advocacy in the age of COVID. These resources and how you actually go and translate them, I think, is very key. And Paula, you've had such success in doing the translation and getting your staff members to understand how to articulate it, but also your friends groups and your trustees, all being able to understand how to apply it and reach out to new communities in a unique way because of it.
I know we have just a couple minutes here and we need to wrap up. So Paula, as that comes over to you, and maybe add in the other question that's in the Q&A about tips for virtual advocacy in the age of COVID. So maybe talk a little bit about how your specific library is handling that. In just a moment, I'm going to post over in the chat a link where you can go and watch the presentation that Skip referenced with the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. So you'll be able to go to that link and register for free to watch it. And I'm also going to post a link with an interview with Simon Sinek, author of Start With Why and What's Your Why, because it dovetails very nicely with the ease of libraries, and we do reference that in that interview as well. So over to you, Paula, and then we'll wrap up and give it back over to Elaine.
Sure. I will say that the two of the 4 E's that we initially suggested have proved right on during COVID, and that is equity and engagement, because there has not been a lot of engagement in person, certainly, not even as much virtually originally, and we have been working on a lot of that. And a lot of what we do has always been about equity, but that was amped up in spades during COVID. With Wi-Fi boosts to our bookmobiles, with Wi-Fi boosts to the parking lots of our buildings. So we have begun doing a lot of virtual programming. We've been turning some of our regular programs into virtual ones. So community conversations, we've done that virtually, and we have series of programs on anti-racism. We have, information. We have done several videos that are STEAM videos to help parents who are at home with their kids and want to do activities with them as well. So I think they're, especially those two, equity and engagement, you cannot go wrong by, because those are really what we're all about.
Yeah,
all of that inclusion and diversity and bringing people together for connections in whatever way, physical or virtual.
Yeah, I agree.
Beth, can I say one thing super quick?
Yep.
With just real quick, with the question relating to the getting groups involved, people are passionate about different things, but people who you want to get involved are going to be passionate about one of the E's. If you find what their passion is, you then say, hey, that's actually one of our E's. It just makes it easier to get them, in no pun intended, but engaged in it, whatever the E may be, because you can say that's one of our E's and they're interested in whatever one it might be. So that's the way I've seen it play out over time as well.
Okay, great. So I put that link over in the chat where you can register to watch that fantastic session with the Friends of the St. Paul Public Library. And they are talking about reframing advocacy during this time. So thank you so much, Skip, for bringing that up. In a moment, I'm going to put in the link for the interview with Simon Sinek. It's always tricky to get links off of Facebook. So, and we broadcast it through Facebook Live, so I'll be putting that in there as well. Remember, if you scroll back up, there are many, many free resources on our website for the ease of libraries, including some other webinars that you can watch. And of course, I'll say again, the great book that Paula put up for us earlier, it is an interactive workbook. You can order it up there. Skip's got his too. And Alan, is he going to do it? Yeah, there we go. Trio there. Fantastic. And now you can buy the book from the ALA store. And we also offer an Action Planner Plus, which includes the ebook for all your board members, some webinars and additional resources. But again, there are many free resources. So over to you, Elaine.
All right, thank you so much, Beth, and thank you for moderating that. So yes, we definitely want to thank our panel, Alan, Skip, and Paula. It's really wonderful to hear about all the ways that this can help libraries and make sure that we're advocating for ourselves in a really interesting time. Okay, so thank you so much. We'll go ahead and just take a couple minutes before our next speakers, but thank you so much again for being here, you all. And, wish I had time to ask Skip about Penguin, but we'll have to do that another time. I have your email now. All right, thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye, thanks.
Okay. All right, Fiona, do you want to go ahead and just bring up the break screen for a couple minutes? We don't want to get too far behind, and we'll bring in Carol and Sharon next.
Yes, absolutely.